There's so much to talk about in the royal space, and perhaps no one better to chat with than Dan Wootton. And so I was so honored to get to sit down virtually, you could say, and chat with Dan about a wide range of topics, including the misconceptions about the British press that Harry and Meghan constantly push, Harry and Meghan's attempts to rewrite history. We have the Megxit as well, and so many other things regarding the royals and Harry and Meghan's life in California. So, guys, I'm so excited for this very special edition of Royal News Network and my conversation with Dan Wootton. So, guys, go ahead and stick around for it. But if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany, and I provide compelling royal commentaries. If you guys want to hit that subscribe button, I would absolutely love to have you back. We have an amazing time here. And I also did want to shout out as well Anna Lucia Diamonds. And I have a small set here in today. And I obviously have my ring as well because Anna Lucia just released a new jewelry cleaner and I did it myself, guys, and it was so easy to use. You just spritz some of this. They have a brush that they give you to really make it shine, then you polish it. So all you do is spritz with this amazingly gorgeous jewelry cleaner, guys. This is stunning. It has launched today officially. It is amazing. So if you guys haven't seen it, it basically looks like a giant diamond. So it is a wonderful thing to have as a backdrop somewhere. So it just is not just something you could say pedestrian or just something average and boring to have on your either, for me, it's my desk space, but your vanity, your bathroom, because this, guys, is a piece of gorgeousness all on its own. So, guys, if you are interested in this, it's so easy to use as well. You just spritz a little bit of this. They give you a brush. So you brush your item you wish to clean, then you rinse it off, polish it, and voila, you have something brand new like my Tiffany and Co ring, which was an absolute tarnished mess. It just was like sticky too. It was like really weird. And so I polished it up. And then I also have my 7 stone eternity band because I do love this thing. And the Tiffany and Co ring, I think, is just slightly smaller. So it helps stay on my finger a bit better. So I absolutely love it. It's just so comfortable and amazing. So classic. Have some earrings here as well. And I have my tennis bracelet right here. So amazing, 2 carats. So if you guys are interested in checking out Anna Lucia, go ahead and click the link up above. And if you use code ROYAL20, you shall save 20%. And so on to my conversation with Dan, and I will as well go ahead and link his channel, Dan Wootton Outspoken, up above here, and it'll be in the comments as well. So check out his program. It is absolutely amazing. And I've been lucky enough to be featured on it twice. So I will put both of those videos down below as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. And I apologize for the quality of the video being kind of odd. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but his looks amazing. So let's go ahead and get started. Because one of the things I've been kind of going over, especially since Tina Brown made her like great comments on Meghan, which were so spot on. Like she has never made a good decision. And as I was like looking back in time, I was like, oh my gosh, this time period for them is like so critical because you have the news that they were dating, I think released today, like 8 years ago. And then they got engaged 7 years ago next month. And
Yeah.
then it was 6 years ago that I think you were one of the first who released, the Tiara Gate story type of thing. And so it's just been like so much has happened around this time period for them. But like when the news officially came out that they were dating and then everything, did you guys, especially in the UK, ever anticipate things would go so off the rails for them as they have? Because it's just like so incredibly crazy. And their efforts to, I think, misinform people about the perspective of how much she was embraced by Britain initially, I just think is so wrong. So can you share a little bit about, there was an excitement for her and then it's sort of what happened after that?
Yes, I mean, they have completely rewritten history. By the way, Brittany, so great to be here. Absolutely love
Yes.
your channel. They have completely rewritten history without any doubt. But that time period, it's so funny when you go back to it because actually, I had just broken a story a couple of weeks or about 6 weeks before the Harry and Meghan story broke about Harry snogging essentially Ellie Goulding, the singer,
Ah.
in at an event, at a polo event. And I was like, okay, so he's clearly looking for a
Mhm.
celebrity girlfriend. That's what he's wanting. Now, they very much didn't want that story out there. And I would say it's clearly because the time period in which that went on with Ellie Goulding was coming up very close to the time period in which he met Meghan. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. When Camilla Tominay broke the story in the Sunday Express, it was a complete bolt from the blue. I wasn't a viewer of Suits, so I did not know who Meghan Markle was. I'm not just saying that. I'd never heard her name. I had never heard.
Never me either.
One of my friends, Lizzie Cundy, as it turned out, knew Meghan. So that was like my little insight into that world from quite early on. But I certainly had no preconceived notions about her. And I was positive. That was the thing. I've even got columns that I wrote where I said, Meghan, this is what you need to do in order to make it in the royal family. Do your own things. If you want to keep acting, here's how you can be passionate. Don't let the royal family sort of put you in some sort of box. So I was actually very, very positive about it. I covered the royal family with Megyn Kelly at Windsor. She was at the time reporting for NBC's Today Show. And the vibe in Windsor could not have been more positive. We were behind this. I often say to people, actually, the day of Harry and Meghan's wedding in London reminded me of the same type of vibe that we had in London in 2012 for the Olympics. It was celebratory. Everyone was together. People were out on the streets. Honestly, this was a widely embraced union. So the notion that somehow the British people, because we had backed Brexit, were not happy about having Meghan, a mixed race woman, in the royal family is completely wrong. Now, look, obviously there were some people who picked up on the vibes very early on, and we now know that there was lots going on. But in terms of my writing about what was really happening, it first started with the Thomas Markle debacle. And that was when I first got to know Samantha Markle. And we're good friends now. She's a wonderful woman. And what she said to me back then has proven to now be completely true. So I covered the Markle side from the week before the wedding, but it wasn't until a few months after the wedding when, as you say, I broke the story of Tiara Gate, and no other journalist had even gone there. They hadn't even gone there. And this story, it took a long time for anyone to take it seriously, for it to have credibility, even though I knew it was true, because the royal Rota, I'm not a big fan. They hunt as a pack. And the story was sensational when you look at it out of context. Now, obviously, we know what was going on, but the story was that the Queen, the late Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, had warned Prince Harry about Meghan Markle's treatment of staff and her behavior towards staff. And she said, what Meghan wants, Meghan doesn't get. And we know, of course, it was over the row over Angela Kelly. There's still so much conjecture. Prince Harry's version in Spare is completely inaccurate. But yeah, that was the opening of the floodgates, because also buried within that story, and it would obviously turn out to be a much, much bigger story as the weeks and months went on, was the fact that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had fallen out with Meghan over the way that she was speaking to staff at Kensington Palace, because at that point, they were still neighbours at Kensington Palace. So that was the beginning of the unravelling. But this idea that somehow people like me had a preconceived notion and that we were out to destroy Meghan and it had anything to do with the fact that she happened to be mixed race is just utterly insane. Actually, for a long time, the media was almost so scared of the reaction from Harry, because remember, he had already spoken about racism in that ridiculous statement so early on that everyone was too scared to say anything negative about Meghan. So it was the bravery of my editor, who's a guy called Tony Gallagher. He was editor of The Sun at the time. He's now editor of the Times of London. It was his bravery to say, no, I'm going to let you run this story, because of course it was his head that was on the chopping block as well as mine. But there was a little catch. He said, you can run the story, but I'm not going to put it on the front page, because he sort of felt like he was testing out the waters.
That's very interesting, because I remember reading that story, because I was never a fan of Meghan from the jump, because I knew she was
you got it right. You got it right, Brittany. I got it wrong.
She immediately struck me as a D-list actress desperate for attention, which was exactly the right read for her, as it turned out. I'm almost bummed I don't really have that, like, in writing or on video, because it's like that was really my initial thought. And I had watched royals for a long time, and so I'm just curious because you mentioned the royal rota, and I know, again, Harry and Meghan, I think, like to put a lot of misinformation out there, especially to, let's say, a more ignorant American audience in some ways of how royalty works. So, how exactly does the royal rota system work? Because I know it's like a select group of reporters that can always follow the royals. And so, how is it sometimes that they are, let's say, constrained or want to be constrained in the stories they share because they don't want to, let's say, limit their access to the royal family?
That's completely true. That is completely true. So I have never been a part of the Royal Rota. So you're completely right. How the Royal Rota works is that there's a select group of official royal correspondents. They tend to work for the major newspapers, so the Times, the Daily Telegraph, the Sun, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Mail, and the big British broadcasters, the BBC, Sky News, ITV News, GB News, where I used to work, is not part of the Royal Rota. So for me, not being part of the Royal Rota actually gave me incredible freedom because I was never following the royals on their trips or at functions or writing their press releases. Now, I'm not saying that's not a valid job, by the way. Of course,
Mhm.
there is a job to do in terms of just tracking the day-to-day movements of the royal family. The Queen's here today. This is the King's big announcement. I'm not saying that isn't a job. And I'm not saying it's not a valid job. But the problem with those people in the Royal Rota, Brittany, is they're completely reliant on access to the royal
Mm.
family, access to these events. They're surrounded constantly by the courtiers who work for the royal family, who are the gatekeepers of the royal family. And if I look at the royal reporters who I trust and who I believe, like, for example, Robert Jobson, who is part of the Royal Rota, but he's been around for a very long time. He won't mind me saying that. His view is that there's no point speaking to the official courtiers for the royal family who are actually there spinning effectively for them because they
Mhm.
don't tell you the truth. If they want a story out there, they're going to put it out. Their job is to effectively stop stories getting out. Now, I didn't have any of those constraints, and I had a very brave editor because let me tell you, Brittany, the establishment within the royal family were desperately trying to stop me running these stories. And again, this is the irony because you talk about the disinformation coming from Meghan Markle, and this is the irony because no, the royal family were trying to stop people like me from writing the stories about what was really going on. They were so desperate to make it work. So, this idea that there were stories being leaked out officially from the royal family are just not true. But eventually the dam had to burst, right? Because the
Mhm.
behavior was so bad. And actually, Harry's behavior was so bad. I'm not one of these people who is an apologist for Prince Harry and thinks that it's all Meghan Markle's fault. I know there are some people in the royal beat who have that view, and I think it's a perfectly valid view to have. But no, a lot of this bad behavior was being driven and concocted by Prince Harry as well. So he doesn't get a pass from me.
Yeah, because I know I'm kind of mixed because I think a lot of this would not have happened without Megan, of course, but Harry obviously had his part to play as well. But I'm just curious because obviously we know, and from what always experienced following royals, is that it is a very kind of tight ship, you could say, within what kind of information gets leaked to the press. And I know you can't give away exactly any sources and stuff, but I would imagine that some of how you were getting these stories is that their behavior was just so bad. People felt like they had no recourse but to go to the press to share what was going on.
Absolutely. And the thing with me is that quite, I guess, early on, it became very obvious to people within the royal family that I had the balls, sorry to use that language, but to actually break these difficult stories. So
Mhm.
if they wanted a bit of a touchy story out there, then there was more chance, I guess, that I was going to break the story than someone else. But honestly, breaking royal stories is so difficult. My background had been in the world of entertainment and news and politics. And of course, in that world, you can very often speak to the celebrities involved, you can speak to the politicians involved, you can talk to them off the record. It doesn't work that way in the royal family. Sadly, I can't just pick up the phone to Prince William. That's not how it works. But I think eventually most of the royal households came to the realization, including, by the way, Harry and Meghan's household, came to the realization that it was stupid not to speak to me because I was breaking these stories, and surely you want your point of view included
Mhm.
in the story.
Yeah, because what I've noticed is Meghan, I think, tries to portray herself as such this innocent angel who's the victim of everyone, and I just can imagine a staffer going, "No, wait, you're totally different behind the scenes. This narrative you're trying to push, like, we know the real you." And so that's just so important to share. And so when you are, speaking to whoever was within the royal household, do you think really at the end of the day, Meghan ever really had any good intentions in the UK, or was she just in it for the eventual money grab she was hoping to get?
Well, I personally don't think she came into it with any good intentions. Whether she thought that she would leave so quickly is another question. But she was
Mm.
completely delusional about what life within the royal family was going to be. I mean, for someone who, to some degree, is an intelligent woman, she could also be really stupid, actually, because she had no idea about what life in the royal family was really going to involve. But the problem is, Brittany, and remember, I've spoken to so many people who worked with Meghan Markle during her time in show business, and she was already a major diva. Now, not all actresses are. And by the way, very often it's the A-list actresses who are particularly nice. Very often it's the C-listers, the
Mhm.
D-listers who are so desperate to climb up the greasy pole, who are particularly horrible. But Meghan had a real reputation in entertainment for being incredibly difficult. Demands for first class flights, demand for free clothes, demands for the best hotels in the world. She wasn't a celebrity who had a good reputation in the industry. Now,
Mm.
obviously, I only know this after the fact because I've done a whole load of research about Meghan's time within the entertainment industry. I wasn't
Mm.
following her at the time, whereas I know there were some columnists in the UK, for example, Katie Hind of the Mail on Sunday, who had met Meghan and who had been invited to a very trashy hotel for a night out with Meghan, where Meghan was boasting about the fact that Ashley Cole, who was a big professional footballer in England at the time with a real reputation for being a love rat, that he was messaging her. And then I broke in the years after Meghan joined the royal family that, in fact, she had also been in touch with Matt Cardle, who won the X Factor in the UK, and Max George, who was a member of the boy band The Wanted. So she was certainly on the lookout for a British celebrity. There's no
Mm.
doubt about that. But the problem is, and this is where it comes back to the royal family, is Meghan was already a diva when she entered into the royal family. Now,
Mhm.
that's a very different situation, Brittany, to Sophie or Fergie or Princess Diana or Catherine, because they were ordinary people effectively. Now, they might come from a privileged background, in the case of Diana, certainly, but they weren't divas. So this was a very new thing for there to be a famous woman entering the royal family. But the problem is she was already difficult. She was already a diva.
Mm.
And she wanted to be paid for her work within the royal family. Well, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But
Mhm.
she was totally money obsessed right from the start. So now knowing what I know, and as I say, I'm very honest about the fact that it's taken me a lot of research over a number of years to really work out what her intentions were. But now I absolutely believe that she was in it to become the most famous woman in the world, a very, very rich woman, and crucially, to enter the White House, which might sound fanciful now because she's so unpopular, but she had political ambitions too. So you've got to remember that's a part of it as well.
Yeah, and I could totally see her being that level of delusion. And obviously, when it came down to it, Megxit was sort of the massive exit strategy she came up with. I do think it's so sad in many ways that Harry lost out on the last kind of normal Christmas with his family to go to Canada with Meghan. And so you got the Megxit story and you gave them a long period of time to kind of respond to you. So what did you think when you first got this sort of leak, and did it turn into what you kind of initially thought when you first heard about it? Because I mean, obviously they had this whole thing of they were going to be half in half out and all this sort of stuff, which didn't end up happening.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, look, obviously I'm a journalist, so I was very excited. I'm not going to lie. It was
Oh yeah.
arguably the biggest story that I've broken in my career. And so I was desperate to break the story. But I knew that breaking the story was going to involve jumping through a lot of hoops because they were not going to want me to break this story. And my editor didn't want to run the story without confirmation. So that was really difficult. So I had to trust Harry and Meghan's team, which I didn't do. And we now know from Spare, where Harry refers to me as the sad little man, that in fact, he was doing everything possible to stop me from breaking the story, Brittany, even calling the late Queen to say, the Sun's got the story, we're going to have to rush our statement out. Now, thank God they didn't, because if I'd been scooped of that story, I would have been absolutely devastated. But look, I played ball with them. I
Hmm.
spoke to them, I think it was 10 days beforehand, because I got the tip. I think it was Boxing Day. I was back in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, where I'm originally from. And so it was really difficult because I was also working, on a totally different time zone to the UK. So it took a few days to make progress. But the thing where there's, again, a lot of misperception about that story is that Harry and Meghan's team were briefing me and were contributing to the story as well. So for them to say that I had somehow ambushed them just isn't true. And in terms of where it ended up, I mean, my original story, yes, of course, they were hoping for a half and half out. Initially, the plan was to move to Canada, but was it really? I'm not convinced. I always think they had Hollywood in mind, but it felt more palatable to the Queen to be able to say, Canada, it's part of the Commonwealth.
Hmm.
But there were some critical details within my first story. For example, the fact that they were prepared to give up their royal titles. And so in the end, really, even though I had to write it a little bit softly on day one, by day two, we had come up with our now famous front page, which invented the word Megxit. So day one, I was a little bit cautious, but effectively the story was it turned out to be, completely accurate. They were planning to spend a great deal of time of the year in Canada. They were wanting to begin exit negotiations with the royal family about departing, including King Charles and the late Queen, and they were prepared to give up their titles to make it happen. But so much of this was just done out of spite, because, and that's what I'll never get my head around. I mean, another key detail in that story, and I know that it's 100% true, is that Harry and Meghan were partly pushed into, or they felt pushed into doing this very quickly because they were so angry about the photo that the late Queen had released over Christmas. Now, it's an incredibly iconic, famous photo of the late Queen, King Charles, Prince William, and Prince George, the direct heirs to the throne. I mean, why would Harry and Meghan expect to have any involvement in that photo? They were never in that. They were never one of the direct heirs to the throne. And I guess maybe more of the message was sent about the fact that there wasn't a picture of them or their family at all in the late Queen's Christmas message. But that's because their behavior by that point had been so abominable.
Well, and obviously as well, when it comes to royals, and I meant make sure to say this quite a bit, it's a hierarchy. It's like that's just
Yes.
what it is. You can't really supersede it. There's some Middle Eastern countries where that's not totally the case, but most of them are hierarchies. So you know your place in the pecking order for sure. This should not be rocket science. But for Megan, it really seemed to be that she was just shocked that she married the sixth in line to the throne, and that meant she was a wife to the sixth in line to the throne. What
Yeah.
what do you think
But
about
the thing
that?
is, well, no, I think you're completely right. But in terms of the bad decisions that Meghan made, though, it was such a bad decision right from the start for her to
Mhm.
say, no, I don't want to make my own money. I don't want to be able to still do acting. Because just imagine the situation where Meghan could have actually made herself. I mean, and this is where
Mhm.
she's so crazy with her arrogance. She could have made herself the most demand person in Hollywood if she had said, okay, I am going to, right from the start, she could have been half and half out because there was never a desire to make her a full time royal. But she was the one who demanded, no, 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 I'm quitting acting. This
Mhm.
is my full time job. And then she wasn't prepared for the hard work that goes along with that. I mean, speak to Princess Anne about the reality of
Mhm.
a full time member of the royal family. It ain't glamorous. It's hard
No.
work. It's long days. you are turning up to that Nottingham Community Centre on a grisly Tuesday morning with a few people in the crowd to greet you. Now, of course, for Harry and Meghan, it was already so much better than that because there was so much excitement around them. But nothing was good enough for her because of her diva-like behavior. But I just think if you think to what the late Queen initially offered Meghan, so this is once the
Mhm.
engagement happened, it would have been brilliant for her. It would have been so much better than what it is now because Harry would have still been able to be in the royal family playing an official role. Given what happened with King Charles and Catherine this year, I mean,
Mhm.
he would have been leading the charge. It would have been an incredible opportunity for him. He would have been sent to major diplomatic events, and he could have been doing all of that while Meghan could have still been pursuing the type of career that she wants now. There was actually nothing to stop her appearing in a Netflix show or doing her own documentary. So strategically, she got it all wrong because she demanded the full-time access to the royal family. Then, when it didn't work out, she wanted the half and half out, and it was too late by that point.
Yes, because I mean, I think Megan would have been better off probably never marrying Harry and just utilizing the fame that she finally got from dating him to catapult her into a maybe a different acting tier. But she didn't really have a, you could argue a ton of talent in her acting field. But my interesting question is like when it comes to Megxit, I mean, was that just a horrifically bad mistake, bad error in judgment on their part because it's kind of funny now to look back on it, but people were saying they were going to have this $1 billion entertainment empire and it looks like they might not even get a couple of $1 million entertainment empire when it comes to the end of the day considering probably how much money they've lost over just time. It's crazy.
Absolutely disastrous decision. I mean, again, because I was so close to the story during their time in the royal family, I know, Brittany, that there were so many other options for them if they'd just taken some time. So, do you remember the discussions that were taking place about, oh, do we maybe make Harry the Governor General of New Zealand? Is there a role where he can be situated in Africa and for 6 months
Mhm.
a year be a sort of royal goodwill ambassador throughout Africa? Now, if he had done that, all of the bugbears that he now has, for example, security costs, they would have been covered because he would have
Mhm.
remained a working member of the British royal family. And all of those options were on the table. Because remember, Megxit didn't happen overnight. People knew that it hadn't worked out and that things were not going well and that there had to be some sort of release point. But I think Hollywood was all driven by Meghan. It was all driven by
Mhm.
money. But the problem is they're not used to hard work. They're difficult. And now they are completely commercially toxic. I mean, after Spotify calling them effing grifters, why on earth would someone else sign up to them? And look, we've seen what's happened, isn't it? It's a case of diminishing returns. So archetypes will go on, but it will go
Mhm.
on Limoncello Media, a very, very small player. And that is not going to give her the type of fortune that she now expects and that also Harry expects because he wants private jets everywhere. He wants a massive security detail everywhere. It's like, mate, you're not making Elon Musk style money. You're not making Mark
Mhm.
Zuckerberg style money. You're not even making Obama style money. So this is not going to be easy. And of course, remember, Obama has the Secret Service protection with him as
Mhm.
president.
Yeah, their security demands, I think, are completely delusional. I mean, California can be a somewhat unsafe place. I actually think last time I was there, I almost got mugged. So there are definitely rough areas of California, but I'm sure in Montecito they can drive themselves places, but they insist on having security drive them. And just as their time in California, because they're coming up on, 5 years post Mexit almost, do you think they're really happy in California or not? I mean, I think in some ways Megan is, and I can see Harry enjoying himself, but at the same time, I bet you there's a lot of regret and resentment in some ways that's probably starting to build a bit.
Of course, I mean, they're not happy people, are they? They're not
No.
happy people. They're victims. And the problem is, if you go into the world with a victim mentality, you find reasons not to be happy. And it was only a matter of time before they turned on each other and blamed one another. And we know now from the confirmation of the twin track approach that things haven't worked out. That's confirmation that things haven't worked out. Because remember, you were telling us you were like salt and pepper. You worked much better together. You shared an office. All of a sudden, the briefing is now, no, we're not doing anything together. And actually, the revelations from Meghan are much more honest than she's ever been. She wants to chase the money, the big bucks, the moolah. And Harry hates that. And he effectively only knows one thing. He's a bit like a zoo animal, isn't he? Released and wild, And
Yeah.
it's a horrible thought, but it's true. I mean, he only knows one thing, Harry, and that is turning up to events, being a bit of a cheeky chappy, having everyone love you and complete adoration, but not having to work very hard. So all of a sudden, when he was in Hollywood, and it's like, okay, you might have to record an episode for this every week. You might have to come up with concepts. You're going to have to interview people. Who's your co-host going to be? He doesn't know anything about hard work. Now, you can't necessarily blame him for that, but that's why, Brittany, everyone was warning him before Megxit, don't do this. You're going to hate it. You're going to struggle making your own money. You're not going to get security, Harry. Don't do it. They warned him time and again. Charles warned him. The Queen warned him. William warned him. Everyone at the Sandringham Summit warned him. The media warned him. So I'm sorry, you can't make your bed and then not prepared to lie in it. But in terms of their happiness, I mean, of course, they're living in a mega mansion. Montecito is a great place to be, amazing weather, brilliant restaurants. So on one hand, I'm sure there is part of them that's happy. But remember, they're both incredibly ambitious people in their own ways. And they're also both incredibly bitter people with massive chips on their shoulders. And it just has not worked out. And we saw that in perhaps the most glaring way with the Hollywood Reporter article. I mean, that's devastating to Meghan. So I think there's certain things they're happy about, but remember, there's a huge amount of insecurity. There's a lot of financial insecurity. And Harry is so concerned about the fact that he's about to be taken over, not in the royal pecking order, but in the media pecking order by a young Prince George and a young Prince Louis. That's his future. He's losing his hair. He's losing his looks. He no longer comes across as a cheeky chappy. I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons to be unhappy, but this is the choice that they made against the better judgment of so many people who they should have listened to and who they should have trusted.
Yes, it's so sad in many ways because they could have had such a great success potentially, but it required, I think, skills neither one of them actually possess or the drive to actually make themselves successful. Because as you and I both know, if you do this sort of thing, content creation and stuff, and it takes time and effort and energy. So
It's
it's
hard work. But the bigger problem is, Brittany, though, as soon as they had done the Oprah Winfrey interview,
yeah.
there's no going back. That was everything there. That was the moment when they turned on their own flesh and blood at a time when Prince Philip was literally dying and the late Queen was going through her own major health struggles. Now, that was the moment there was no turning back. Then there was the Netflix documentary and Spare. Now, that obviously just compounded it on top of Oprah. So any sort of change of strategy now is futile, to be completely honest. But they did have an opportunity, I think, because we're talking about the bad decisions they made along the way. And I still think there was a post-Megxit opportunity that would have looked very different for them. But that required not doing the Oprah Winfrey interview. But their business, their nastiness, the chip that they have on their shoulders, they were never not going to do that interview. They were so completely riven by hatred and jealousy and negativity towards their own family members. And we know how Meghan has treated her own father. So I believe that Oprah was the critical moment. At that point, there was no going back. And okay, their decline may have not have been immediate, but if you look at it, it's like from the Oprah interview, the only way was down.
Yeah, and you think about it as well, the Oprah and Winfrey interview was the catalyst for the more, official laid out bullying allegations in the Times because their staff were like, "We know what you're going to do here. So we're going to put our piece out there because people need to know who the real you is." And without that, that might have not come up until maybe now
Exactly.
or maybe not at all.
Because the royal family had covered it up.
Mhm.
And and again, this is where Meghan is such a purveyor of disinformation, translation, liar, because the royal family hadn't leaked the bullying investigation during all of that time. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So none of what Harry and Meghan argued in the Oprah interview, Brittany, actually makes any sense.
Mm-mm.
Because if the men in grey suits, and we know who they're talking about, Simon Case, Edward Young, all of those, the official main courtiers, if the men in grey suits had been so desperate to destroy Meghan, which is what her claim is, remember, all they needed to do was get someone to call me up and say, holy crap, there's a bullying investigation going on. It's now formal. HR are involved. They never did that. And as you say, they only did that not officially, but via the staff members who were so furious in the days before the Oprah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really been quite astounding to see their downfall for what could have been a very successful, I think, post Megxit life. So, Dan, those were all the questions I had. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me a bit. This has been so fun.
Oh, thank you, Brittany. I love the Royal News Network, and I love having you on my show as well. So you'll have
Yes.
to come back soon.
Hmm. Oh, and I will be in the UK in December
Oh, well, we've got to
a
meet.
bit. Yes, we should meet in person. I will be
Oh my
there
God, yes, you've
first
got
week
to
of
tell me when you're
December.
there. You can come and see my studio too.
Yes, that would be so cool. Yeah, I'll be there but in December, hopefully popping around and doing a couple of different things. So I'm very excited.
Oh
It's
my God,
always
that's
fun to be in
amazing.
the UK.
Well, that's
All right.
amazing. You're going to have to let me know.
Okay, I will let you know. I'm still kind of finalizing things because I'll probably go to Sweden for the Nobels, fingers crossed, and a couple other things. But I will be there for the state visit. I'm very excited. I mean, I can't really cover it because Royal Rota protocols, but I'm like, I just want to be there for the state visit. It would be awesome.
That is so great. I love that, Brittany. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Have a wonderful
Have a
day.
great
And I guess
day.
happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween.
All
See you,
right.
Brittany.
Bye.
Bye bye.
So, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that. It was just so fun to chat with him. I'm so looking forward to maybe meeting Dan and maybe a couple other people when I'm in the UK. That would be incredible because it's just so awesome to have these friendships develop online and then get to meet in person as well. So, guys, I appreciate you turning in. Have a wonderful day, and I shall see you guys again very, very soon. Bye.